We've got with us Dr. Talha Sami, who is a medical practitioner, but he's more than that. He is a keen researcher. His work has already been heard on the airwaves when he did the historical trip of the second caliph of the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud Ahmadin, back in 1924. But he's also done some fantastic research and on the contribution of black African Americans and their contribution to the Ahmadi Muslim community. Jazakallah for, and may God Almighty reward you. Thank you for giving us your time this morning, Dr. Talha.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for having me once again.
I'll start with October. This is celebrated as Black History Month. How do you see this month, and is there a significance to celebrating it?
I believe we should look at the origins of this. So it started almost a century ago in a different form, and then expanded with civil rights to become what we know as Black History Month. Of course, it's important to understand all cultures and history. I think potentially the issue here may well be that some people say it's only 1 month. How can you summarize Black history for 1 month? Some people may say, there's a focus on select figures only. So there is a nuanced understanding we need to have in this discussion about how important Black history is, and then the expansion of understanding it more in detail than perhaps what we just see that is put to us on the media, and that investigative nature that needs to be there ourselves.
Fantastic. You've studied and researched Black history extensively, and the contribution, especially from the Ahmadi Muslim community's perspective, and as you mentioned, civil rights. What was the biggest surprise you found in your research?
That's a very good question. I would like to just preface my work, if I may.
Please.
So, over the past 10 years or so, I've looked at the history of Islam in the Western world, in England and in America. And one of the things I saw is that Islam in America, I felt, was not accurately represented. And looking deeper and deeper, I felt there were so many stories that were untold. Now, when I look at American Islam, I think it's not consistent with what I'm seeing in the books. Often there is a historical understanding from the 20s, 30s and 40s about what Islam was and where the Ahmadiyya Muslim community came into it. With the 60s, 70s, 80s and even to this day, there is a complete omission of those early efforts, although true historical efforts do acknowledge the Ahmadiyya Muslim community as the pioneers, the champions of Islam all across America. And that ties in with the fact that the African Americans were some of the biggest uptake within the religion of Islam and had an uplift from it. I would say the biggest surprise perhaps was that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community sat alongside all of the movements of the day. So it sat alongside with the Ghazi movement, which promoted a back to Africa and a pro-African thought in the 1920s. As naturally cultures evolve and change, there was a move towards jazz, which became one of the most powerful movements in America, and it was the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and the jazz musicians of the day that changed the fabric. So the religion is influencing the music in so many ways. And then as the 70s come on, the civil rights movement develops and jazz fades away, then the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is influencing that. It's called the forerunner to the civil rights movement by some scholars, and it's influencing people like Malcolm X in a tremendous way, and these are the things that are not talked about.
Now, as you said, most, if not all people do not know that Black history and the Ahmadiyya Muslim community are intertwined, and you've already alluded to that. Can you please shed some more light on this?
Of course. So I would say that, look, Islam in America started potentially even before the slave trade. There is that thought, and it would be scary to think that Islam is a religion that's almost native to America, particularly in this climate. But the real group of Muslims that came were the slaves from West Africa, princes, kings. They were erudite, they were learned, they were travelers, and we need to reshape our narrative there. We can only look moving forward at the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in the modern day and age as the first Islamic group that came purely for the propagation of Islam, and the same could be said in England as well. Now, with the outburst of Islamic missionary work from 1889 onwards to the Western world, very, very soon after, we're seeing missions established in West Africa and America, particularly in America. Muhammad Mufti Sadiq, may Allah be pleased with him, he converts almost 700 to up to 1,000 people in Chicago, in St. Louis, in Indianapolis, all around America. And the majority of them are African Americans. Now, there is a slight shift towards understanding his contributions more, particularly by scholars like Dr. Patrick Byrne, Dr. Fanusi, Richard Brent Turner.
Now, you've mentioned some prominent black figures. Can you share some more prominent black figures that our listeners can relate to? I mean, away from an academic point of view, who were influenced and where the contribution or the influence of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community was significant in their lives. I mean, in recent years, with the passing of, I think it was Brother Ismail and Brother Majid, who were significant figures within with music world, and which surprised people when they heard that they belonged to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community.
Well, look, I would say this approach needs to be those who are not black, and then there were those that were black. So Islam was introduced in the mundane age by people like Mufti Sadiq, we mentioned, who did tremendous work over 3 years. But then his forerunner, then the person that followed him as the third missionary, Sufi Bengali, may Allah be pleased with him, he provided the Islamic presence for 20 years, the longest presence in America from 1928 approximately to 49. I mean, this was completely unheard of at that time. He's going to Chicago, he's writing books, he's giving Islam an indigenous American native flavor. And a lot of the uptake, again, comes through African Americans. But then, of course, we must focus on who were those figures that he influenced. So someone like Talib Daoud, someone like Rashid Ahmed American. Talib Daoud, a jazz musician who gives up music, spends all his money on propagating Islam, sets up an Afro-Islamic mission within Philadelphia. He does leave the Ahmadiyya Muslim community only to come back towards it at the end of his life. He has almost what I would describe as bordering on violent exchanges with other Islamic movements of the time. He's a writer, he's an author, he's a traveler. Someone like Rashid Ahmed American, completely different cut of cloth. So a hustler in America. He then becomes the first African-American missionary to America because he goes and studies in Rava in the late 1940s. Now, contrast this with the great stories of someone like Malcolm X. Rashid Ahmed American travels and spends time in the Muslim world. He writes his own biography. He comes back to America to preach. So these are people that are not mentioned. We should gravitate towards people like Malik al-Shabazz and Muhammad Ali, who also had significant MD influences on them. But we need to look at other figures as well.
Now, what do we need to do to ensure that Black history is not just an allocated month and then we say we celebrate it? It needs to become everyday general knowledge. What needs to be done, especially for moving forward with the youth of today?
I would agree with you, and I think I find that hard to answer, so my answer may be weak in some way. We do need racial awareness, and I think for me, this journey started by looking at the companions of the Prophet Muhammad. May Allah be pleased with him, and the blessings of Allah be upon the Prophet Muhammad. Now, it started with the companions around him, and then from there, I looked at what happened in Africa with Islam, how Africa became one of the centers of the Islamic world, East Africa, West Africa as well. And for me, this was new knowledge, things I'd never looked at or thought about, and it took some time and understanding of something completely foreign. Then moving forward, I looked at how Black thinkers in the West, who were often influenced by Islam, someone like Du Bois or Blyden, who also spoke about India because there was a collaboration between the two. So I think these things go far deeper than Black history. It's world history as well. But I would advocate starting, if interested, in looking at the Islamic world with the origins of Islam and moving from there.
Now, my final question, something that frustrates me, because I have an interest in Black history as well. Something that frustrates me is when we talk of Black history, we tend to start with, slavery. People don't realize that Black history and Africa goes way beyond slavery. years. I mean, that's not where it started. In fact, that's where it kind of there was a blip. Before that blip, there was enormous history, wealth, prosperity within Africa, wasn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, you only need to look at the civilizations of East Africa and how it was Arab merchants that came there and built cities upon trade. No violence to bring Islam to East Africa. Or if you look at how, say, the Quran school was set up in West Africa, and this gave birth to a literary society. And unfortunately, what's happened is often as Muslims, we may not be interested in the peripheral Islamic world, certainly let alone Africa. Now, beyond that, I would also then say, look at those individuals that then went from Africa to America, right? And it will give you a taste of what they were. This is best captured by the work of Alan Austin, who wrote about Muslim slaves and how they were well-read, erudite, they were sometimes princes, they were kings, they were masters of trade, and they were ripped from their own society and put into another.
Now, this history that you talk of, I know there's some fantastic work that you've already done, and it will be aired within the next coming weeks or months. Do you want to give a little plug on what we can expect?
Sure. So I'm very grateful to the Voice of Islam for giving me the chance to go over 3 seasons of the Untold Story of Islam in Black America, which focuses on the great contributions of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community from 1920 to 2020. I'm joined each series by prominent African-American Muslims, travelers, themselves who are well-versed in history, and those who have lived through it as well, most importantly. So I look forward to that being aired and shared with everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Dr. Talha, for giving us your time this morning. I wish you a fantastic weekend ahead. May peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh.